I walked into that gala with a literal target on my back and a secret that would have ruined every person in that room, but I never expected to walk out having stolen the heart of the most dangerous man in the city. How do you tell a billionaire, a man who buys and sells legacies for breakfast, that the woman he's falling for doesn't technically exist? I was standing there, holding a champagne flute I couldn't afford, wearing a dress that cost more than my childhood home, and staring into the eyes of Silas Vane while my earpiece crackled with the voice of the man who sent me there to destroy him. Was I wrong for playing the game? Or would you have risked your life for a chance at a different world too? Tell me, if you were one step away from escaping poverty, but it meant breaking the only heart that ever beat for you, would you pull the trigger or would you burn the whole mission down? It all started 6 months ago in a basement apartment that smelled like damp concrete and desperation. My name is Elara. At least, it was until I met Marcus. Marcus was a fixer. Or so he called himself. He found girls like me, girls with nothing to lose and a talent for blending in, and he turned us into weapons. He told me about Silas Vane, the reclusive billionaire who had just inherited the Vane global empire. Silas was known for being cold, calculated, and completely untouchable. But Marcus needed something from Silas's private archives, something that could bring the whole Vane family to their knees. And he decided I was the perfect person to get it. He spent months training me. I learned how to speak 4 languages, how to identify vintage wines by scent alone, and how to mimic the effortless grace of the ultra-wealthy. By the time he was done with me, Elara the waitress was dead. In her place was Isabella Rossi, a mysterious heiress from a fallen European dynasty. I had a backstory that could pass a background check, and a wardrobe that screamed old money. The goal was simple: get close to Silas, gain his trust, and find the digital key to his private vault. The first time I saw him wasn't at a party. It was at a small, rain-drenched charity auction for an orphanage. Marcus knew Silas had a soft spot for children's causes. It was his only known weakness. I arrived late, looking intentionally disheveled but expensive, acting as if I didn't want to be noticed. I sat in the back row, and for the entire night, I felt his eyes on me. Silas Vane didn't look like the monsters the tabloids described. He had sharp, architectural features and eyes that seemed to see through every lie I'd ever told. When the auction ended, he approached me. He didn't lead with a pickup line. He just stood there and asked why a woman wearing a limited edition Chanel brooch looked like she wanted to cry during the bidding for a playground set. I told him the truth, or a version of it. I told him that I knew what it felt like to have nothing. That was the moment the hook was set, but I didn't realize I was the one getting caught. Over the next few weeks, Silas became an obsession. Not because of the mission, but because of the man. He would fly me to Paris for dinner just because I mentioned I liked a specific type of pastry. He would send flowers to my hotel suite every morning, but they weren't roses. They were wild jasmine, because I'd once told him they reminded me of my grandmother's garden. He was opening up to me in a way Marcus said was impossible. Silas told me about the crushing weight of his father's legacy, about how he felt like a prisoner in a golden cage, and how I was the only person who didn't look at him and see a bank account. Every time he touched my hand, my heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of being caught, but from the sheer guilt of the betrayal I was planning. I was falling for the mark. I was falling for the man I was supposed to ruin. Marcus was getting impatient. He started showing up at my apartment, threatening to expose me if I didn't get the key soon. He reminded me that I wasn't Isabella. I was a girl from the slums who owed him everything. He gave me a deadline: the Vane Masquerade Ball. It was the biggest event of the year, held at Silas's private estate. The security would be tight, but Silas would be distracted. Marcus wanted the key that night, or he'd ensure I disappeared forever. On the night of the ball, I felt like I was walking toward my own execution. I wore a mask of gold filigree, but the real mask was the one I wore on my soul. Silas looked breathtaking in a custom tuxedo, his eyes searching for me the moment I entered the ballroom. He took my hand and led me to a private balcony overlooking the ocean. He told me he had something important to tell me. He said that in a world full of fake people and corporate vultures, I was the only thing that felt real. He reached into his pocket, and for a second, I thought he was going to propose. Instead, he pulled out a small, silver thumb drive, the very key Marcus wanted. He handed it to me and said, "I know who you are, Elara." My blood turned to ice. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He didn't call me Isabella. He used my real name. He explained that he'd known from the second week. He'd tracked Marcus down and realized I was being coerced. He told me that he'd been waiting for me to tell him the truth, but when I didn't, he decided to give me the choice himself. "This drive contains everything Marcus wants," Silas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It also contains enough evidence to put Marcus away for life. You can take this to him and get your freedom, or you can give it to the police and stay with me. I'm putting my life and my legacy in your hands because I love you, and love means nothing without trust." I stood there, trembling, holding the destiny of two men in my palm. This is the moment where everything hung in the balance. I had the billionaire's heart and his empire's greatest secret right there. So that's the situation I was in. And I had to make a choice that would change my life forever. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have taken the money and run, fearing it was a trap? Or would you have trusted the man who had every reason to hate you? I really want to see your thoughts on this, because in that moment, I felt like the most hated and the most loved woman on earth at the same time. I didn't take the drive to Marcus. I took it to the authorities. But before that, I went to Marcus's hideout one last time. I told him I had the key, but I needed to see the original files he had on me first. He was so blinded by greed that he let his guard down. While he was celebrating his victory, the police, coordinated by Silas's security team, moved in. Marcus was arrested on charges of extortion, fraud, and a dozen other crimes he'd committed over the years. As they led him away in handcuffs, he screamed at me, calling me a traitor. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like I finally owned my own name. However, the aftermath wasn't just a fairy tale. When the news broke that a mystery girl had been involved in a massive sting operation against an underground fixer, the press went wild. My real identity was splashed across every headline. People called me a gold digger, a spy, and a manipulator. Silas's board of directors demanded that he cut ties with me immediately, claiming I was a liability to the company's image. I expected him to agree. I prepared myself to go back to my old life, grateful at least to be free from Marcus. I packed my few belongings and left a note for Silas, telling him that I loved him enough to let him keep his reputation. I was at the bus station, waiting to head back to my hometown, when a black sedan pulled up. Silas stepped out, looking exhausted but determined. He didn't care about the board, and he didn't care about the headlines. He told me that he'd resigned as CEO. He'd appointed a successor and kept his shares, but he was done living for a company that didn't care about his happiness. He said he didn't want a mystery girl or an heiress. He wanted Elara. We left the city that night. We didn't go to a palace or a private island. We went to a small house by the coast where nobody knew our names. It took a long time for the guilt to fade, and even longer for me to believe that I deserved the love he gave me. We built something real out of a mountain of lies. In those first few months by the sea, the silence was deafening. Silas, a man who was used to the roar of private jets and the clinking of crystal glasses at billion-dollar deals, was suddenly learning how to fix a leaky faucet and plant a vegetable garden. It was a slow, painful transformation. I watched him sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. He would stare at his reflection in the window, searching for the man he used to be. I felt a crushing weight of guilt, thinking I had destroyed the great Silas Vane, and replaced him with a man who looked lost in his own kitchen. But one morning, I found him sitting on the porch, watching the sunrise with a cup of cheap coffee in his hand. He looked at me and said, "Elara, for the first time in 30 years, I don't have a schedule. I don't have a quota. I just have you." It was in that moment I realized we hadn't just escaped Marcus. We had escaped the expectations of the entire world. But the world wasn't done with us yet. Marcus, even from behind bars, had a long reach. He had associates, men who had profited from his fixing services, and they weren't happy that their middleman was in jail. We started getting phone calls that would hang up the second we answered. Sometimes we'd find a single black jasmine flower on our doorstep, a mockery of the flowers Silas used to send me. It was a psychological game, a reminder that we were being watched. Silas wanted to move again, to vanish even further, but I refused. I told him that if we kept running, we'd never be free. We decided to fight back using the only thing Silas had left, his brilliant mind for strategy. He began working secretly with a private security firm, using his remaining resources to trace the calls and the flowers. We discovered that Marcus's old partner was trying to squeeze us for an exit fee of $50 million. Instead of paying, Silas leaked an encrypted file to the press that linked several of those associates to a massive money laundering scheme. He didn't just protect us, he burned the entire criminal network to the ground from a laptop in a small coastal cottage. It was the ultimate Vane move, but done for love, not profit. After the threat was neutralized, we finally felt a sense of peace, but it was a fragile one. We had children. 2 beautiful daughters who grew up thinking their father was just a consultant, and their mother was a local artist. We never told them about the masquerade, the digital key, or the girl named Isabella Rossi. But as they got older, the curiosity grew. One day, our eldest found a dusty box in the attic containing the gold filigree mask I wore that night. She brought it down, her eyes sparkling with wonder, and asked, "Mommy, were you a princess?" I looked at Silas, and he nodded softly. We spent that entire night telling them the truth, because a legacy built on lies is just another prison. We told them that their father wasn't a hero because he was rich, but because he was willing to be poor for the sake of his soul. And we told them that their mother wasn't a villain for lying, but a survivor who found her truth in the arms of the man she was supposed to destroy. The transition from our quiet life to the public eye happened once more when a documentary filmmaker uncovered the story of the resigned billionaire. Suddenly, we were in the spotlight again. But this time it was different. We weren't a scandal. We were a symbol of hope. People wanted to know how we stayed together when the world was against us. Silas and I sat for one interview, just one, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Money buys you comfort, but truth buys you a life." I chose the life. We used the fame from that documentary to launch the Elara initiative on a global scale. We didn't need the Vane Global Board anymore. We had a community of people who believed in our mission. We spent our golden years traveling to the places we'd helped, seeing the schools and the clinics that were built not with blood money, but with the freedom fund Silas had set aside. I remember sitting in a small school in a remote village, watching a young girl read a book, and I realized that my life had come full circle. I was no longer the girl in the basement. I was the woman who made sure other girls never had to live in one. As we got older, Silas's health began to fade. The years of stress and the toll of his former high-pressure life finally caught up with him. In his final days, he wasn't worried about his stocks or his properties. He just wanted to be on the porch, holding my hand. He told me, "Elara, if I had to do it all again, the mission, the lies, the scandal, the poverty, I would do it in a heartbeat just to see you walk into that gala one more time." He passed away peacefully, looking at the ocean we had both grown to love. The funeral was small, just as he wanted. No CEOs, no politicians, just the people whose lives he had actually touched. I stayed in that house for many more years, the walls echoing with the laughter of our grandchildren. I realized that the mystery girl wasn't a role I played. It was the chrysalis I had to break through to become the woman I was meant to be. I learned that love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who challenges you to be honest with yourself. I lived 1,000 lives in those 80 years. Waitress, spy, heiress, wife, mother, and activist. But the best one was just being Elara. And now, as I prepare to join Silas, I look back at that young girl in the basement, and I wish I could tell her, "Don't be afraid of the dark. It's the only place where the stars can truly shine." Every decision I made, even the ones that felt like mistakes at the time, were just steps on the path to this porch. I hope my story gives you the strength to face your own Marcus, to tear up your own $10 million check, and to find the person who loves you for the scars you try so hard to hide. Because in the end, the only thing you take with you isn't the gold or the fame. It's the memory of the person who looked at your soul and said, "I know who you are and I love you anyway." Like this video if you are on my side through this entire journey. Subscribe for more stories that remind you that life is more than just a headline. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I do the right thing by telling my children the truth, Or should some secrets stay buried forever? I'll see you all in the next story.